It's after 9 o'clock. I guess I should get this show started. And, of course, the first thing I did was forget to unmute my microphone, so that's the second time I said that. But it is Thursday, and why is my microphone saying I am so loud? So it is time for Tales from 221B. Which, of course, means that we will be reading more Sherlock Holmes. How many of my friends are streaming right now? Several of them. How many ad breaks is Twitch going to try to push on me? I ran my own 3-minute ad, then they turn around and run another 3 minutes. I'm drinking coffee. It's not beer, I swear. Well, it's like Monster coffee. So it's... Well, it's got the fizziness of being nitro infused, which just makes it taste funny. Okay. Ooh, and now that I will be extremely gassy as well. Let me do something real quick. Not that one. Okay. Am I muted? No, my channel's not muted. I'm just hearing everyone else's channel at the same time. And now Sly's coming on too. What the hell? So if you're not here, you could always go hang out with Oni. Did he actually spell it wrong? No, he didn't. I spelled it wrong. You could hang out with the Pixel Doctor. Oh, well, let me do it. Or you could hang out with Shrekker Sly, because she is also really cool. There's a lot of cool people on right now. So if you want to watch them and just listen to me or lurk with me, that's entirely up to you, man. I mean, after all I am doing is reading Sherlock Holmes. Let's see. Well, let me... Nope. Still won't let me shut up, Doctor. Oh, well. But yeah, it is 9:06 on a Thursday. The time, of course, being Central. this one more time. Because I'm going to shut these people out whether they like it or not. Okay. Okay, Pixel Doctor, shut it up. Da, 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 da. There's Striker's theme music playing in the background. What that? No, I'm not going to answer Tell right now. I'm streaming. Let's see, clips and highlights. Everyone, youngster, okay. Da, 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 da. And what's she saying? Okay. Oh, excuse me. Oh. I really apologize. That's what I get for chugging a carbonated coffee. Okay, let me see if I can... let's see, who else do I want to shout out? Evie. Evie is also streaming right now. There are a lot of people I want to shout out. I also want to shout out my book. It's still on sale. It's still out there. Buy copies. Hopefully Kel has still got the missions in the rotation. Let me check. Stream Elementals. Bonk. Yes. Show me my dashboard, please. Is that my music playing? Yeah, it's... Okay. Dun, 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 dun. I hear too much music going on at the same time. Okay. Timers. We are doing a read stream. Okay, I'm going to shorten that because it gets overlooked. Because I really do apologize when I'm doing a reading stream. I don't really respond to chat that much, and I feel bad for it, honestly. Makes me wish I could do more games. Well, wish I could do more game streams, just so that I wouldn't be so out of it most of the time. A wild Murkrow. Do I need a Murkrow? I don't think I do, but I'm going to try to catch it anyway. Dun 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 dun. Okay. Still hearing Striker's music, so. But anyway, I need to... We're in the wrong room. Oh, that's not the thing I wanted. Credit card bills. No, I don't want to look at those right now. I didn't catch the macro, but oh well. I am really loud according to my thing. Okay, we're going to go ahead and switch over to study because that's where the books are. Well, that's where the mature books are. I feel like I want to make new scenes, but I don't want to spend the time to do it. I would really wish my mouth would work better. Let me try... Try see if I can get V-Bridger turned on. Da 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 da. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Striker's playing Baldur's Gate. Faust is back on. Where is he? Yes, Faust is back on. Okay. See if it will attach. No, I am using the YouTube Studio. How do we connect? Why is... Okay, V-Bridger's not even wanting to do anything at all. I would really like V-Bridger to work. I honestly would like everything to work, but... And that is a very big but, much like mine. Anyway. Oh. I am not sitting in my chair. Let me fix this. Capture. Sit. Good boy. Okay. Anyway, we are reading Sherlock Holmes tonight. And whatnot. And if you saw my alert message, there's vampires. I really should have done this on Halloween. There is actually a vampire story for Sherlock Holmes. And that's going to be the first reading tonight. Cool? Cool. In fact, the way it's written kind of makes me think of Dracula. But considering they were written roughly the same time period, it's entirely possible. So, without any further ado, because there is much ado about nothing. Hold on, let me check one more thing real quick. Okay, that's good. I present to you The Adventure of the Sussex Vampire. Holmes had read carefully a note which was last post had brought him. Then, with a dry chuckle, which was his nearest approach to a laugh, he tossed it over to me. For a mixture of the modern and the medieval, of the practical and the wildly fanciful, I think this is surely the limit, he said. What do you make of it, Watson? I read as follows. November 19th, 46 Old Jury. Response, vampires. Sir, our client, Mr. Robert Ferguson, of Ferguson and Moorhead, tea brokers of Mincing Lane, have made some inquiry from us in the communication of an even date concerning vampires. As our firm specializes entirely on the assessment of machinery, the matter hardly comes within our purview, and we have therefore recommended Mr. Ferguson to call upon you and lay the matter to you. We have not forgotten your successful action in the case of Matilda Briggs. We are, sir, faithfully yours, Morrison, and Dodd, per EJC. Matilda Briggs was not the name of a young woman, Watson, said Holmes in a reminiscent voice. It was a ship which was associated with the giant rat of Sumatra, a story for which the world is not yet prepared. But what do we know about vampires? Does it come within our purview either? Anything is better than stagnation, but really we seem to have been switched to a Grimm's fairy tale. Make a long arm, Watson, and see what V has to say. I leaned back and took down the great index volume to which he referred. Holmes balanced it on his knee, and his eyes moved slowly and lovingly over the record of old cases, mixed with an accumulation information of a lifetime. A Voyage of the Gloria Scott, he read. That was a bad business. I have some recollection that you made record of it, Watson, though I was unable to congratulate you upon the result. Victor Lynch, the forger, the venomous lizard of Gia, remarkable case, that. Victoria, the circus belle. Vanderbilt and the Yeggman, Vipers, Vigor, Hammersmith Wonder. Hello, good old index. You can't beat it. Listen to this, Watson. Vampirism in Hungary, and again, vampires in Transylvania. He turned over the pages with eagerness, but after a short, intent perusal, he threw down the great book with a snarl of disappointment. Rubbish, Watson, rubbish. What have we to do with walking corpses that can only be held in their grave by stakes driven through their hearts? It's pure lunacy. But surely, said I, the vampire was not necessarily a dead man. A living person might have the habit. I have read, for example, of the old sucking the blood of the young in order to retain their youth. You are right, Watson. It mentions the legend in one of these references. But are we to give serious attention to such things? This agency stands flat-footed upon the ground, and there it must remain. The world is big enough for us. No ghosts need apply. I fear that we cannot take Mr. Robert Ferguson very seriously. Possibly this note may be from him, and may throw some light upon what is worrying him. He took up a second letter, which had lain unnoticed upon the table whilst he had absorbed the first. This he began to read with a smile of amusement upon his face, which gradually faded away into an expression of intense interest and concentration. When he had finished, he sat for some little time, lost in thought, with the letter dangling from his fingers. Finally, with a start, he roused himself from his reverie. Cheeseman's. Lamberley. Where is Lamberley, Watson? It is in Sussex, south of Horsham. Not very far, eh? And Cheeseman's? I know that country, Holmes. It is full of old houses which are named after the men who built them centuries ago. You get Audleys and Harveys and Cartons. The folk are forgotten, but their names live on in their houses. Precisely, said Holmes coldly. It was one of the peculiarities of his proud, self-contained nature that, though he docketed any fresh information very quickly and accurately in his brain, he seldom made any acknowledgment to the giver. I rather fancy we shall know a good deal more about the Cheesemans, Lamberley, before we are through. The letter is, as I had hoped, from Robert Ferguson. By the way, he claims acquaintance with you. With me? You had better read it. He handed me the letter across, and it was headed with the address quoted. Dear Mr. Holmes, it said, I have been recommended to you by my lawyers, but indeed the matter is so extraordinarily delicate that that is most difficult to discuss. It concerns a friend for whom I am acting. This gentleman married some 5 years ago a Peruvian lady, the daughter of a Peruvian merchant, whom he had met in connection with the importation of nitrates. The lady was very beautiful, but the fact that her foreign birth and her alien religion always caused a separation of interests and of feelings between husband and wife. So that after a time his love may have cooled towards her, and he may have come to regard their union as a mistake. He felt there were sides of her character which he could not explore nor understand. This was the more painful, as she was as loving a wife as a man could have, to all appearance absolutely devoted. Now for the point which I will make more plain when in mate. Indeed, this note is merely to give you a general idea of the situation, and to ascertain whether you would care to interest yourself in the matter. The lady began to show some curious traits quite alien to her extraordinarily sweet and gentle disposition. The gentleman had been married twice, and he had one son by the first wife. This boy was now 15, very charming and affectionate youth, though unhappily injured through the accident in childhood. Twice the wife was caught in the act of assaulting this poor lad in the most unprovoked way. Once she struck him with a stick and left a great weal on his arm. This was a small matter, however, compared with her conduct to her own child, a dear boy just under 1 year of age. On one occasion, about a month ago, this child had been left by its nurse for a few minutes. A loud cry from the baby, as of pain, called the nurse back. As she ran into the room, she saw her employer, the lady, leaning over the baby and apparently biting his neck. There was a small wound in the neck, from which a stream of blood had escaped. The nurse was so horrified that she wished to call the husband, but the lady implored her not to do so, and actually gave her £5 as a price for her silence. No explanation was ever given, and for the moment the matter was passed over. It left, however, a terrible impression upon the nurse's mind, and from that time she began to watch her mistress closely, and to keep a closer guard upon the baby, whom she tenderly loved. It seemed to her that even as she watched the mother, so the mother watched her, and that every time she was compelled to leave the baby alone, the mother was waiting to get at it. Day and night the nurse covered the child, and by night and day the silent, watchful mother seemed to be lying in wait, as a wolf waits for a lamb. It must read most incredible to you, and yet I beg you to take it seriously, for a child's life and a man's sanity may depend upon it. At last there came one dreadful day when the facts could no longer be concealed from the husband. The nurse's nerve had given away, she could stand the strain no longer, and she made a clean breast of it all to the man. To him it seemed a wild tale, as it may seem to you now. He knew his wife to be a loving wife, and, save for assaults upon her stepson, a loving mother. Why then should she wound her own dear baby? He told the nurse that she was dreaming, that her suspicions were those of a lunatic, and that such libels upon her mistress were not to be tolerated. Whilst they were talking, a sudden cry of pain was heard. Nurse and master rushed together to the nursery. Imagine his feelings, Mr. Holmes, as he saw his wife rise from a kneeling position beside the cot, and saw the blood upon the child's exposed neck and upon the sheet. With a cry of horror, he turned his wife's face to the light and saw blood all around her lips. It was she beyond all question, who had drunk the poor baby's blood. So the matter stands. She is now confined to her room. There has been no explanation. The husband is half demented. He knows, and I know, little of vampirism beyond the name. We had thought it was some wild tale of foreign parts, and yet here in the very heart of England's Sussex, well, All this can be discussed with you in the morning. Will you see me? Will you use your great powers in aiding a distracted man? If so, kindly wire to Ferguson, Chessman's Lamberley, and I will be at your rooms by 10 o'clock. Yours faithfully, Robert Ferguson. P.S. I believe your friend Watson played rugby for Blackheath when I was 3/4 of Richmond. It is the only personal introduction which I can give. Of course I remember him, said I, and as I laid down the letter, Big Bob Ferguson, the finest 3/4 Richmond ever had. He was always a good-natured chap. It's like him to be so concerned over a friend's case. Holmes looked at me thoughtfully and shook his head. I never get your limits, Watson, he said. There are unexplored possibilities about you. Take a wire down, like a good fellow. We'll examine your case with pleasure. Your case? We must not let him think that this agency is a home of the weak-minded. Of course it is his case. Send him that wire and let the master rest until morning. Promptly at 10 o'clock the next morning, Ferguson strode into our room. I had remembered him as a long, slab-sided man with loose limbs and a fine turn of speed, which had carried him round many an opposing back. There is surely nothing in life more painful than to meet a wreck of a fine athlete whom one has known in his prime. His great frame had fallen in, his flaxen hair was scanty, and his shoulders were bowed. I fear that I roused corresponding emotions in him. There, Watson, he said, with his voice was still as deep and hearty. You don't look quite the man you did when I threw you over the ropes in the crowd at Old Deer Park. I expect I've changed a bit also, but it's this last day or two that has aged me. I see by your telegram, Mr. Holmes, that it is no use my pretending to be anyone's deputy. It is simpler to deal direct, said Holmes. Of course it is, but you can imagine how difficult it is when you are speaking of the one woman whom you are bound to protect and help. What can I do? How am I to go to the police with such a story? And yet the kiddies have got to be protected. Is it madness, Mr. Holmes? Is it something in the blood? Have you any similar case in your experience? For God's sake, give me some advice, for I am at my wit's end. Very naturally, Mr. Ferguson. Now sit here and pull yourself together and give me a few clear answers. I can assure you that I am very far from being at my wit's end, and that I am confident we shall find some solution. First of all, tell me what steps you have taken. Is your wife still near the children? We had a dreadful scene. She is the most loving woman, Mr. Holmes. If ever a woman loved a man with all her heart and soul, she loves me. She was cut to the heart that I should have discovered this incredible secret. She would not even speak. She gave no answer to my reproaches, save to gaze at me in some sort of wild, despairing look in her eyes. Then she rushed to her room and locked herself in. Since then she has refused to see me. She has a maid who was with her before the marriage, Dolores by name, a friend rather than a servant. She takes food to her. Then the child is in no immediate danger. Mrs. Mason, the nurse, has sworn that she will not leave at night or day. I can absolutely trust her. I'm more uneasy about poor little Jack, for, as I told you in my note, he has twice been assaulted by her. But never wounded. No, she struck him savagely. It is more terrible that he is a little poor, inoffensive cripple. Ferguson's gaunt features softened as he spoke of the boy. You would think that the dear lad's condition would soften anyone's heart. A fall in childhood and a twisted spine, Mr. Holmes, but the dearest, most loving heart within him. Holmes had picked up the letter of yesterday and was reading it over. What other inmates are there in your house, Mr. Ferguson? 2 servants who have not been long with us. 1 stable hand, Michael, who sleeps in the house. My wife, myself, my boy Jack, baby, Dolores, and Mrs. Mason. That's all. I gather that you did not know your wife well at the time of your marriage. I'd only known her a few weeks. How long had this maid Dolores been with her? Some years. Then your wife's character really would be better known by Dolores than you. Yeah, you might say so. Holmes made a note. I fancy, said he, that I may be of more use at Lamberley than here. It is eminently a case of personal investigation. If the lady remains in her room, our presence could not annoy or inconvenience her. Of course, we should stay at the inn. Ferguson gave a gesture of relief. It is what I hope, Mr. Holmes. There is an excellent train at 2 from Victoria, if you would come. Of course we will come. There is a lull at present. I can give you my undivided energies. Watson, of course, comes with us. But there are 1 or 2 points upon which I wish to be very sure before I start. This unhappy lady, as I understand it, has appeared to assault both the children, her own baby and your little son. That is so. But the assaults take different forms, do they not? She has beaten your son. Once with a stick, and once very savagely with her hands. Did she give no explanation why she struck him? None save that she hated him. Again and again she said so. Well, that is not unknown among stepmothers. A posthumous jealousy, we will say. Is the lady jealous by nature? Yes, she is very jealous. Jealous with all the strength of her fiery, tropical love. But the boy, he is 15, I understand, and probably very developed in his mind since his body has been circumscribed in action. Did he give you no explanation of these assaults? No, he declared there was no reason. Were they good friends at other times? No, there was never any love between them. Yet you say he is affectionate. Never in the world could there be so devoted a son. My life is his life. He is so absorbed in what I say or do. Once again, Holmes made a note. For some time he sat lost in thought. No doubt you and the boy were great comrades before the second marriage. You were thrown very close together, were you not? Very much so. And the boy, having no affectionate nature, was devoted, no doubt, to the memory of his mother. Most devoted. He would certainly seem to be a most interesting lad. There is one other point about these assaults. Were the strange attacks upon the baby and the assaults upon your son at the same period? In the first case it was so. It was as if some frenzy had seized her, and she vented her rage upon both. In the second case, it was only Jack who suffered. Mrs. Mason had no complaint to make about the baby. That certainly complicates matters. I don't quite follow you, Mr. Holmes. Possibly not. One forms provisional theories and waits for time for fuller knowledge to explode them. A bad habit, Mr. Ferguson. But human nature is weak. I fear that your old friend here has given an exaggerated view of my scientific methods. However, I will only say that the present stage of your problem does not appear to me to be insoluble, and that you may expect to find us at Victoria at 2 o'clock. It was evening of a dull, foggy November day, when, having left our bags at the Chequers, Lamberley, we drove through the Sussex clay of a long, winding lane, and finally reached the isolated and ancient farmhouse in which Ferguson dwelt. It was a large, straggling building, very old in the centre, very new in the wings, with towering Tudor chimneys and lichen-spotted, high-pitched roof of Horsham slabs. The doorsteps were worn into curves, and the ancient tiles which lined the porch were marked with the rubus of the man and cheese, after an original builder. Even the uneven floor. Within the ceilings were corrugated with heavy oaken beams, and the uneven floors sagged into sharp curves. The odor of age and decay pervaded the whole crumbling building. There was one very large central room, into which Ferguson led us. Here, in a huge old-fashioned fireplace with an iron screen behind it, dated 1670, there blazed and sputtered a splendid log fire. The room, as I gazed around, was the most singular mixture of dates and of places. The half-panelled walls may have well belonged to the original yeoman farmer of the 17th century. They were ornamented, however, to the lower part by a line of well-chosen modern watercolors. While above, where the yellow plaster took the place of oak, there hung a fine collection of South American utensils and weapons, which had been bought, no doubt, by the Peruvian lady upstairs. Holmes rose with that quick curiosity which sprang from his eager mind and examined them with some care. He returned, his eyes full of thought. "Hello," he cried, "hello!" A spaniel had lain in a basket in the corner. It came slowly towards its master, walking with difficulty. Its hind legs moved irregularly, and its tail was on the ground. It licked Ferguson's hand. "What is it, Mr. Holmes?" "The dog. What's the matter with it?" That's what puzzled the vet, a sort of paralysis. Spinal meningitis, he thought, but it is passing. He'll be all right soon. Won't you, Carlo? A shiver of acid passed through the drooping tail. The dog's mournful eyes passed from one of us to the other. He knew that we were discussing his case. "Did it come on suddenly?" "In a single night." "How long ago?" "It may have been 4 months ago." "Very remarkable. Very suggestive." "What do you see in it, Mr. Holmes?" "A confirmation of what I had already thought." "For God's sake, what do you think, Mr. Holmes? It may be a mere intellectual puzzle to you, but it is life and death to me. My wife, a would-be murderer, my child in constant danger. Don't play with me, Mr. Holmes. It is terribly serious." The big rugby three-quarter was trembling all over. Holmes put his hand soothingly upon his arm. "I fear that there is pain for you, Mr. Ferguson, whatever the solution may be," he said. "I would spare you all I can. I cannot say more at the instant, but before I leave this house I may have something definite." "Please God you may. If you will excuse me, gentlemen, I will go up to my wife's room and see if there has been any change." He was away for some minutes, during which Holmes resumed his examination of the curiosities upon the wall. When our host returned, it was clear from his downcast face that he had made no progress. He brought with him a tall, slim, brown-faced girl. "Tea is ready, Dolores," said Ferguson. "See that your mistress has everything she can wish." "She very ill," cried the girl, looking with indignant eyes at her master. "She no ask for food. She very ill. She need doctor. I'm frightened to stay alone with her without doctor." Ferguson looked at me with a question in his eyes. "I should be so glad if I could be of use." "Would your mistress see Dr. Watson?" "I take him. I no ask leave. She needs doctor." "Then I'll come with you at once." I followed the girl, who was quivering with strong emotion, up the staircase and down an ancient corridor. At the end was an iron-clamped and massive door. It struck me as I looked at it, as if Ferguson tried to force his way to his wife, he would find it no easy matter. The girl drew a key from her pocket, and the heavy oaken planks creaked on their old hinges. I passed in, and she swiftly followed, fastening the door behind her. On the bed, a woman was lying who was clearly in a high fever. She was only half conscious, but as I entered she raised a pair of frightened but beautiful eyes and glared at me in apprehension. Seeing a stranger, she appeared to be relieved, and sank back with a sigh upon her pillow. I stepped up to her with a few reassuring words, and she lay still while I took her pulse and temperature. Both were high, and yet my impression was that the condition was rather that of a mental and nervous excitement, rather than an actual seizure. "She lay like that 1 day, 2 day, afraid she die," said the girl. The woman turned her flushed and handsome face towards me. "Where is my husband?" "He is below, and would wish to see you." "I will not see him. I will not see him." Then she seemed to wander off into delirium. "A fiend! A fiend! Oh, what do I do with this devil?" "Can I help you in any way?" "No. No one can help. It is finished. All is destroyed. Do what I will, all is destroyed." The woman must have had some strange delusion. I could not see honest Bob Ferguson in the character of fiend or devil. "Madam," I said, "your husband loves you dearly. He is deeply grieved at this happening." Again she turned on me those glorious eyes. "He loves me, yes, but do I not love him? Do I not love him even to sacrifice myself rather than to break his heart? That is how I love him, and yet he could think of me, he could speak of me so." "He is full of grief, but he cannot understand." "No, he cannot understand, but he should trust." "Will you not see him?" I suggested. "No, no. I cannot forget those terrible words nor the look upon his face. I will not see him. Go now, you can do nothing for me. Tell him only one thing. I want my child. I have a right to my child. That is the only message I can send him." She turned her face to the wall and would say no more. I returned to the room downstairs, where Ferguson and Holmes still sat by the fire. Ferguson listened moodily to my account of the interview. "How can I send her the child?" he said. "How do I know what strange impulse might come upon her? How can I ever forget how she rose from beside it with its blood upon her lips?" He shuddered at the recollection. "The child is safe with Mrs. Mason, and there he must remain." A smart maid, the only modern thing which we have seen in the house, had brought in some tea. She was serving it, and the door opened when the youth entered the room. He was a remarkable lad, pale-faced and fair-haired, with excitable light blue eyes which blazed into a sudden flame of emotion and joy the moment they rested upon his father. He rushed forward and threw his arms around his neck with the abandon of a loving girl. "Oh, Daddy," he cried, "I did not know that you were due yet. I should have been here to meet you. I am glad to see you." Ferguson gently disengaged himself from the embrace with a little show of embarrassment. "Dear old chap," he said, patting the flaxen head with a tender hand. "I came early because my friends, Mr. Holmes and Dr. Watson, have persuaded to come down and spend an evening with us." "Is that Mr. Holmes, the detective?" "Yes." The youth looked at us with a very penetrating, and it seemed to me, unfriendly gaze. "What about your other child, Mr. Ferguson?" asked Holmes. "Might we make the acquaintance of the baby?" "Ask Mrs. Wilson to bring the baby down," said Ferguson. The boy went off with a curious, shambling gait which told my surgical eyes that he was suffering from a weak spine. Presently he returned, and behind him came a tall, gaunt woman bearing in her arms a very beautiful child, dark-eyed and golden-haired, a wonderful mixture of the Saxon and the Latin. Ferguson was evidently devoted to it, for he took it into his arms and fondled it most tenderly. Fancy anyone having the heart to hurt him, he muttered as he glanced down at the small, angry red pucker upon the cherub throat. It was at this moment that I chanced to glance at Holmes, and saw the most singular intentness of his expression. His face was set as if it had been carved out of old ivory, and his eyes, which had glanced for a moment from father and child, were now fixed with eager curiosity upon something on the other side of the room. Following his gaze, I could only guess that he was looking out through the window at the melancholy dripping garden. It was true that a shutter had half closed outside and obstructed the view, but nonetheless it was certainly the window that Holmes was fixing his concentrated attention. Then he smiled, and his eyes came back to the baby. On its chubby neck there was a small puckered mark. Without speaking, Holmes examined it with care. Finally, he shook one of the dimpled fists which waved in front of him. "Goodbye, little man. You've made a strange start to life. Nurse, I should wish to have a word with you in private." He took her aside and spoke earnestly for a few minutes. I only heard the last words, which were, "Your anxiety will soon be at rest, I assure you." The woman, who seemed to be a sour, silent kind of creature, withdrew with the child. "What is Mrs. Mason like?" asked Holmes. "Not very prepossessing externally, as you can see, but a heart of gold, and devoted to the child." "Do you like her, Jack?" Holmes turned suddenly upon the boy. His expressive, mobile face shadowed over, and he shook his head. "Jackie has very strong likes and dislikes," said Ferguson, putting his arm around the boy. "Luckily, I am one of his likes." The boy cooed and nestled his head upon his father's breast. Ferguson gently disengaged him. "Run away, little Jackie," said he, and watched his son with loving eyes until he disappeared. "Now, Mr. Holmes," he continued when the boy was gone, "I really feel that I have brought you on a fool's errand, for what can you possibly do save give me your sympathy? It must be an exceedingly delicate and complex affair from your point of view." "It is certainly delicate," said my friend with an amused smile, "but I have not struck up to now with its complexity. It has been a case of intellectual deduction, and when this original intellectual deduction is confirmed point by point by quite a number of independent incidents, then the subjective becomes objective, and we can say confidently that we have reached our goal. I had, in fact, reached it before we left Baker Street, and the rest was merely an observation and confirmation." Ferguson put his big hand on his forehead. "For heaven's sake, Holmes," he said hoarsely, "if you can see the truth in the matter, do not keep me in suspense. How do I stand? What shall I do? I care nothing as how you have found your facts as long as you have really got them." "Certainly, I owe you an explanation, and you shall have it. But you will permit me to handle the matter in my own way. Is the lady capable of seeing us, Watson?" "She is ill, but she is quite rational." "Very good. It is only in her presence that we can clear the matter up. Let us go up to her." "She will not see me," cried Ferguson. "Oh, yes, she will," said Holmes. He scribbled a few lines upon a sheet of paper. "You at least have the entree, Watson. Will you have the goodness to give the lady this note?" I sent it again and handed the note to Dolores, who cautiously opened the door. A minute later I heard a cry from within, a cry in which joy and surprise seemed to be blended. Dolores looked out. "She will see them, she will listen," she said. At my summons, Ferguson and Holmes came up. As we entered the room, Ferguson took a step or two towards his wife, who had raised herself in the bed, but she held out her hand to repulse him. He sank into an armchair, while Holmes seated himself beside him, after bowing to the lady, which looked to him with wide-eyed amazement. "I think we can dispense with Dolores," said Holmes. "Oh, very well, madam. If you would rather she stayed, I can see no objection. Now, Mr. Ferguson, I'm a busy man with many calls, and my methods have to be short and direct. The swiftest surgery is the least painful. Let me say first that will ease your mind. Your wife is a very good, very loving, and ill-used woman. Ferguson sat up with a cry of joy. Prove that, Mr. Holmes, and I'm your debtor forever. I will do so, but in doing so I must wound you deeply in another direction. I care nothing so long as you clear my wife. Everything on earth is insignificant compared to that. Let me tell you, then, the train of reasoning which passed through my mind in Baker Street. The idea of a vampire was to me absurd. Such things do not happen in criminal practice in England. And yet your observation was precise. You had seen a lady rise from the bedside of the child's cot with the blood upon her lips. I did. Did it not occur to you that the bleeding wound may be sucked for some other purpose than to draw blood from it? Was there not a queen in English history who sucked such a wound to draw poison from it? Poison? A South American household. My instincts felt the presence of those weapons on the wall before my eyes ever saw them. I might have been other poison, but that is what occurred to me. When I saw that little empty quiver beside the small bird bow, it was just what I expected to see. If the child were pricked with one of those arrows, dipped in curature or some other devilish drug, it would mean death if the venom were not sucked out. And the dog. If one were to use such poison on one would first try it in order to see that it had not lost its power. I did not foresee the dog, but I had understood him, and he fitted into my reconstruction. Now do you not understand? Your wife feared such an attack. She saw it made and saved the child's life, and yet she shrank from telling you all the truth, for she knew how you loved the boy, and feared lest it break your heart. Jackie? I watched him as he fondled the child just now. His face was clearly reflected in the glass of the window where the shutter formed the background. I saw such jealousy, such cruel hatred, I have seldom seen in a human face. My Jackie? You have to face it, Mr. Ferguson. It is more painful because it is a distorted love, a maniacal, exaggerated love for you, possibly for his dead mother, which has prompted this action. His very soul is consumed with hatred for the splendid child, whose health and beauty are a contrast to his own weakness. Good God! It's incredible. Have I spoken the truth, madam? The lady was sobbing, with her face buried in the pillows. Now she turned to her husband. How could I tell you, Bob? I thought the blow would be to you. It was better that I should wait than that it should come from some other lips than mine. When this gentleman who seems to have powers of magic wrote that he knew all, I was glad. I think a year at sea would be my prescription for Master Jackie, said Holmes, rising from his chair. Only thing is a clouded mind, madam. We can quite understand your attacks upon Mr. Jackie. There is a limit to a mother's patience. But how did you dare to leave the child with these last 2 days? I told Miss Mason I knew. Exactly. So I imagined. Ferguson was standing by the bed, choking, his hands outstretched and shivering. This, I fancy, is the time for your exit, Watson, said Holmes in a whisper. If you will take one elbow of the too faithful Dolores, and I take the other. There now. He added as he closed the door behind him, I think we may leave them to settle the rest among themselves. I have only one further note in this case, in which the letter Holmes wrote the final answer to that which the narrative begins. It ran thus. November 21st, Baker Street. Response, Vampires. Sir, referring to your letter of the 19th, I beg to state that I have looked into the inquiry of your client, Mr. Robert Ferguson, of Ferguson and Muirhead, tea brokers, of Mincing Lane, and that the matter has been brought to a satisfactory conclusion. With thanks of your recommendation, I am, sir, faithfully yours, Sherlock Holmes. I really should have done that on Halloween. That would have been Halloweeny. And I had originally intended on recording it and adding it to the playlist, but I forgot. And thank you for the ear scratches. Right up there. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes, I shall hydrate. That's right. Is my sound alert working? Oh, is it turned off? Duh. Guess it would help if I did that. Okay. There we go. I forgot I had that turned off on the Sherlock Holmes. Oh. Which I honestly don't even know why, because I don't have it on the recording track. Oh, excuse me. But that was just Ramoni. I was, trying to lurk in it, but I hadn't gotten in time. I was there for the raid. Oh, cool. You have to tell me how it is. It'll probably be a while before I'm able to watch it. But had anyone ever thought that there would be a vampire story involving Sherlock Holmes? Ads running. I don't think I've really mentioned it to anyone else, but I may have a new model soon. It'll be a little bit more mage-like. But I told her to take her time with it, so I don't know when it'll be ready, so I'm not going to really talk about it a whole lot. But it's the same person who made this model. So It'll be cool. In the process of cutting it up and rigging it, so. Yeah. Another stream I'm looking in has kind of cool music right now. It's like teaching music. Wait. It's a song about the scientific method. Oh, cool. Okay. See, what is my next story? Da, 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 da. Yeah. Next one should be interesting too. Okay. Do another stretch and hydrate. Just because. I haven't seen the reading screen timer go by. I've seen those Pokemon ones. That's weird. I know I turned the timer down on it. Save. Okay. DVD. Okay, let me go ahead and get my book back up here. But anyway, our second Sherlock Holmes story for the evening. I just like doing the Watson voice. It's fun. And my microphone seems to work a lot better than using my headset, so I'll keep doing it. This makes me wonder what would happen if I had a less cheap microphone and with a filter. Man, I paid $1 plus shipping for this one. It was apparently clearance sale. Which, you know, it's a pretty good microphone for a clearance one. But anyway, Sherlock Holmes. That's why we're here. Garrideb. I'm going to say that's how it's spelled. Okay. The Adventure of the Three Garridebs. It may have been a comedy, or it may have been a tragedy. It cost one man his reason, it cost me a bloodletting, and it cost yet another man the penalties of the law. Yet there was certainly an element of comedy. Well, you shall judge for yourselves. I remember the date well, for it was the same month that Holmes refused knighthood for services which may have been some day described. I only refer to the matter in passing, for in my position of partner and confidant, I am obliged to be particularly careful to avoid any indiscretion. I repeat, however, that this enables me to fix the date, which was the latter end of June of 1902, shortly after the conclusion of the South African War. Holmes had spent several days in bed, as was his habit from time to time, but he emerged that morning with a long foolscap document in his hand and a twinkle of amusement in his azure grey eyes. "There's a chance you may make some money, friend Watson," he said. "Have you ever heard of the name Garrideb?" I admitted I had not. "Well, if you can lay your hand upon a Garrideb, there's money in it." "Why?" "Ah, that's a long story, a rather whimsical one, too. I don't think in all our explorations of human complexities we have ever come upon anything more singular. The fellow will be here presently for cross-examination, so I won't open the matter until he comes. But meanwhile, that's the name we want." The phone directory lay on the table beside me, and I turned over the pages in a rather hopeless quest. But to my amazement, there was a strange name in its due place. I gave a cry of triumph. "Here you are, Holmes, here it is." Holmes took the book from my hand. "Garrideb, N," he read. "136 Little Rider Street, West." "Sorry to disappoint you, my dear Watson, but this is the man himself. That is the address upon his letter. We want another to match him." Mrs. Hudson had come in with a card upon a tray. I took it up and glanced at it. "Why, here it is!" I cried in amazement. "This is a different initial. John Garrideb, Counselor at Law, Moorville, Kansas, USA." Holmes smiled as he looked at the card. "I'm afraid you must make another effort, Watson," said he. "This gentleman is also in the plot already, though I certainly did not expect to see him this morning. However, he is in a position to tell us a good deal which I want to know." A moment later he was in the room. Mr. John Garrideb, Counselor at Law, was a short, powerful man with a round, fresh, clean-shaven face characteristic of so many American men of affairs. The general effect was chubby and rather childlike, so that one received the impression of quite a young man with a broad smile upon his face. His eyes, however, were arresting. Seldom in any human head have I seen such a pair that bespoke a more intense inward life. So bright they were, so alert, oh, so responsive to every change of thought. His accent was American, but was not accompanied with any eccentricity of speech. "Mr. Holmes," he asked, glancing from one to the other. "Ah, yes, your picture is not unlike you, sir, if I may say so. I believe you have had a letter from my namesake, Mr. Nathan Garrideb, have you not?" "Pray, sit down," said Sherlock Holmes. "Shall we, I fancy, have a good deal to discuss?" He took up his sheets of foolscap. "You are, of course, the Mr. John Garrideb mentioned in this document, but surely you have been in England some time." "Why do you suspect that, Mr. Holmes?" I seemed to read the sudden suspicion in those expressive eyes. "Your whole outfit is English." Mr. Garrideb forced a laugh. "I've read of your tricks, Mr. Holmes, but I never thought I would be the subject of them. Where do you read that?" "The shoulder cut of your coat, the toes of your boots. Could anyone doubt it?" Well, I had no idea I was so obviously a Britisher. But business brought me over here some time ago, and so you say my outfit is nearly all London. However, I guess your time is of value, and we did not meet to talk about the cut of my socks. What about getting down to the paper you hold in your hand?" Holmes had in some way ruffled our visitor, whose chubby face was assumed a far less amiable expression. Patience, Mr. Garrideb," said my friend in a soothing voice. "Dr. Watson would tell you that these little discretions of mine sometimes prove in the end to have some bearing on the matter. But why did Mr. Nathan Garrideb not come with you?" "Why did he never drag you into it at all?" asked our visitor, with a sudden outflame of anger. "What in thunder had you to do with it? Here was a bit of professional business between two gentlemen, and one of them must needs call a detective. I saw him this morning, and he told me this fool trick he had played me, and that's why I'm here. But I feel bad about it all the same." There was no reflection upon you, Mr. Garrideb. It was simply zeal upon his part to gain your end, an end which is, I understand, equally vital for both of you. I knew that he had meaning of getting information, and therefore it was very natural that he should apply to me. Our visitor's angry face gradually cleared. Well, that puts it different, he said. When I went to see him this morning, he told me that he had sent to a detective. I just asked for your address and came right away. I don't know police butting into the private matter, but if you're content just to help us find the man, we can be no harm in that. Well, that is just how it stands, said Holmes. And now, sir, since you are here, we had best have a clear account from your own lips. My friend here knows nothing of the details. Mr. Garrideb surveyed me with not too friendly a gaze. Need he know? He asked. We usually work together. Well, there's no reason it should be kept a secret. I'll give you the facts as short as I can make 'em. If you came from Kansas, I would not need to explain to you who Alexander Hamilton Garrideb was. He made his money in real estate and afterwards in the wheat pit of Chicago, and he spent it in buying up as much land as he could make of one of your countries, lying along the Arkansas River, west of Fort Dodge. It's grazing land and lumberland and arable land and mineralized land, and just every sort of land that brings dollars to a man that owns it. He had no kith nor kin, or if he had, I never heard of it. But he took a kind of pride in the queerness of his name. That was what brought us together. I was in the line at Topeka, and one day I had a visit from the old man, and he was tickled to death to meet another man with his own name. It was his pet fad, and he was dead set to find out if there were any other Garridebs in the world. Find me another, said he. I told him I was a very busy man and could not spend my life hiking around the world in search of Garridebs. Nonetheless, he said, that is just what you will do if things pan out as I planned them. I thought he was joking, but there was a powerful lot of meaning in the words, as I was soon to discover. For he died within a year of saying them, and he left a will behind him. It was the queerest will that has ever been filed in the state of Kansas. His property was divided into 3 parts, and I was to have one condition that I found 2 Garridebs who would share the remainder. It's $5 million for each if it's a cent, but we can't lay a finger on it until all 3 of us stand in a row. It was so big a chance that I just let my medical practice slide and I set forth looking for Garridebs. There is not one in the United States. I went through it, sir, with a fine-toothed comb, and never a Garrideb could I catch. And then I tried the old country. Sure enough, there was a name in the London telephone directory. I went after him 2 days ago and explained the whole matter to him, but he is a lone man, like myself, with some women relations, but no men. It says 3 adult men in the will. So, you see, we have a vacancy, and if you will help me fill it, we will be ready to pay our charges. Well, Watson, said Holmes with a smile, I said it was rather whimsical, did I not? I should have thought, sir, that your obvious way was to advertise in the agony columns of the papers. I have done that, Mr. Holmes. No replies. Dear me. Well, it is certainly a most curious little problem. I may take a glance at it at my leisure. By the way, it's curious that you have come from Topeka. I used to have a correspondent, who's dead now, old Dr. Lysander Starr, who was mayor in 1890. Good old Dr. Starr, said our visitor. His name is still honored. Well, Mr. Holmes, I suppose all we can do is report to you that and let you know how we progress. I reckon you'll hear within a day or 2. With this assurance, our American bowed and departed. Holmes had lit his pipe, and he sat for some time with a curious smile upon his face. Well, I said at last, I'm wondering, Holmes, just wondering. At what? Holmes took his pipe from his lips. I was wondering, Watson, what on earth could be the object of this man is telling us such a rigmarole of lies. I nearly asked him so, for there were many times when a brutal frontal attack is the best policy, but I judged it better to let him think he had fooled us. Here's a man with an English coat frayed at the elbow and trousers bagged at the knee, with a year's wear. And yet, by this document and by his own account, he is a provincial American, lately landed in London. There have been no advertisements in the agony columns. You know that I miss nothing there. They are my favourite convert of putting up in a bird. And I would never have overlooked such a cock-pheasant as that. I never knew Dr. Lysander Starr of Topeka. Touch him where you would, he was false. I think the fellow is really an American, but he has worn his accent smooth with years in London. What is his game, then? And what motive lies in the preposterous search for Garridebs? It's worth our attention, for granting that the man is a rascal, he is certainly a complex and ingenious one. We must now find if it is our other correspondent is a fraud also. Just ring him up, Watson. I did so, and heard a thin, quavering voice at the other end of the line. Yes, I'm Mr. Nathan Garrideb. Is Holmes there? I should much like to have a word with Mr. Holmes. My friend took the instrument, and I heard the usual syncopated dialogue. Yes, he has been here. I understand that you don't know him. How long? Only 2 days. Yes, of course. It is a most captivating prospect. Will you be at home this evening? I suppose your namesake will not be there. Very good. We will come then, for I would rather have a chat without him. Dr. Watson will come with me. I understood from your note that you do not go out often. Well, we shall see you around 6. You need not mention it to the American lawyer. Very good. Goodbye. It was twilight of a lovely spring evening when even Little Ryder Street, one of the smaller offshoots of the Edgware Road, within a stone-cast of old Tyburn tree of evil memory, looked golden and wonderful with slanting rays of the setting sun. The particular house to which we were directed was a large, old-fashioned, early Gregorian edifice with a flat brick face broken only by 2 deep bay windows on the ground floor. It was on the ground floor that our client lived, and indeed the low windows proved to be the front of a huge room in which we spent his waking hours. Holmes pointed out that we passed a small brass plate which bore the curious name. Up some years, Watson, he remarked, indicating the discolored surface. It's his real name, anyhow, and that is something to note. The house had a common stair, and there were a number of names painted on the wall, some indicating offices and some private chambers. It was not a collection of residential flats, but rather an abode of bohemian bachelors. Our client opened the door for us himself, and apologizing by saying that the woman in charge left at 4 o'clock. Mr. Nathan Garrideb proved to be a very tall, loose-jointed, round-backed person, gaunt and bald, some 60-odd years of age. He had a cadaverous face, with the dull, dead skin of a man whom exercise was unknown. Large round spectacles and a small protruding goat's beard combined with his swooping attributes to give him an expression of peering curiosity. The general effect, however, was amiable, though eccentric. The room was as curious as its occupant. It looked like a small museum. It was broad and deep, with cupboards and cabinets all around, crowded with specimens, geological and anatomical. A case of butterflies and moths flanked each side of the entrance. A large table in the center was littered with all sorts of debris, while a tall brass tube of a powerful microscope bristled up amongst them. As I glanced around, I was surprised at the university of the man's interests. Here was a case of ancient coins. There was a cabinet of flint instruments. Behind him, the central table was a large cupboard of fossil bones. Above was a line of plaster skulls with such names as Neanderthal, Heidelberg, Cro-Magnon printed beneath them. It was clear that he was a student of many subjects. As he stood in front of us now, he held a piece of chamois leather in his right hand with which he was polishing a coin. "Syracusan of the best period," he exclaimed, holding it up. "They degenerated greatly towards the end. At their best I hold them supreme, though some prefer the Alexandrian school. "You will find a chair here, Mr. Holmes. Pray allow me to clear these bones. And you, sir, yes, Dr. Watson, if you would have the goodness to put the Japanese vase to one side, you will see round me the little interests of life. My doctor lectures me of never going out, but why should I go out when I have so much to hold me here? I can assure you that as adequate cataloguing of one of these cabinets would make me 3 good months." Holmes looked round with curiosity. "But do you tell me that you never go out?" said Holmes. "Now and again I drive down to Sotheby's or Christie's. Otherwise I very seldom leave my room. I am not too strong, and my researches are very absorbing. But you can imagine, Mr. Holmes, what a terrific shock, pleasant but terrific, it was for me when I heard that unparalleled good fortune. It only needs one more Garrideb to complete the matter, and surely we can find one. I had a brother, but he is dead, and the female relatives are disqualified. But there must surely be others in the world. I had heard that you handled strange cases, and that was why I sent to you. Of course, this American gentleman is quite right, and I should have taken his advice first. But I acted for the best." "I think you acted very wisely indeed," said Holmes. "But are you really anxious to acquire an estate in America?" "Certainly not, sir. Nothing would induce me to leave my collection. But this gentleman has assured me that he will buy me out as soon as we have established our claim. $5 million was the sum named. There are a dozen specimens in the market at the present which would fill my gaps of the collection, which I am unable to purchase for want of a few £100. Just think what I could do with $5 million. Why, I have the nucleus of a national collection. I shall have the Hans Sloane at my age." His eyes gleamed behind his great spectacles. It was very clear that no pains would be spared by Mr. Nathan Garrideb in finding a namesake. "I merely called to make your acquaintance, and there is no reason why I should attempt to interrupt your studies," said Holmes. "I prefer to establish personal touch with those whom I do business. There are a few questions I need to ask, and I have for you your very clear narrative in my pocket, and I filled up the blanks with this American gentleman called. I understand that up to this week you are unaware of his existence?" "That is so. He called last Tuesday." "Did he tell you of our interview today?" "Yes, he came straight back. He had been very angry." "Why should he be angry?" "He seemed to think that it was some reflection of his honor, but he was quite cheerful again when he returned." "Did he suggest any course of action?" "No, sir, he did not." "Has he had, or asked for, any money from you?" "No, sir, never." "You see no possible objects he has in view?" "None, except for that he states." "Did you tell him of our telephone appointment?" "Yes, sir, I did." Holmes was lost in thought. I could see that he was puzzled. "Have you any articles of great value in your collection?" "No, sir, I am not a rich man. It is a good collection, but not a very valuable one." "You have no fear of burglars?" "None at the least." How long have you been in these rooms?" "Nearly 5 years now." Holmes's cross-examination was interrupted by an imperative knocking at the door. No sooner had our client unlatched it than an American lawyer burst in excitedly into the room. "Here you are," he cried, waving the paper over his head. "I thought I should be time to greet you, Mr. Nathan Garrideb. My congratulations. You're a rich man. Our business is happily finished, and all is well. As to you, Mr. Holmes, we can only say we are sorry to have given you any useless trouble." He handed over the paper to our client, who stood staring at the marked advertisement. Holmes and I leaned forward to read it over his shoulder. This is how it ran. Howard Garrideb, constructor of agricultural machinery, binders, reapers, steam and hand plows, drills, harrows, farmers' carts, buckboards, and all other appliances. Estimates for artesian wells. Apply Grosvenor Building, Anston. Glorious! Gasped Hope. That makes the third man. I'd opened up inquiries in Birmingham, said the American, and my agent there sent me this advertisement from a local paper. We must hustle and get things through. I've written to this man and told him that you will see him tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock. You want me to see him? What do you say, Mr. Holmes? Don't you think it would be wiser? Here I am, a wandering American with a wonderful tale. But why should he believe what I tell him? But you're a Britisher with solid references, and he is bound to take notice of what you say. I will go with you if you wish, but I have a very busy day tomorrow. I could always follow you if you are in any trouble. Well, I've not made much of a journey for many years. It's nothing, Mr. Garrideb. I've figured your own connections. You leave at 12, and we'll be there soon after 2. Then you can come back the same night. All you have to do is see this man, explain the matter, and get an affidavit of existence, and by the Lord, he added hotly, considering I've come all the way from the center of America, it is surely little enough for you to go 100 miles in order to put this matter through. Quite so, said Holmes. I think this gentleman says is true. Mr. Nathan Garrideb shrugged his shoulders with a disconsolate air. Well, if you insist I should go, said he, it is certainly hard for me to refuse you anything, considering the glory of hope that you have brought into my life. Then it is agreed, said Holmes. No doubt you will let me have a report as soon as you can. I'll see to that, said the American. Well, he added, looking at his watch, I've got to get on. I'll call tomorrow, Mr. Nathan, and then we'll off to Birmingham. Coming my way, Mr. Holmes? Well, then, goodbye, and we may have some good news for you tomorrow night. I noticed that my friend's face cleared when the American left the room, and the look of thoughtful perplexity had vanished. I wish I could look over your collection, Mr. Garrideb, he said. In my profession, all sorts of odd knowledge comes useful, and this room of yours is a storehouse of it. Our client shone with pleasure, and his eyes gleamed from behind his big glasses. I'd always heard that you, sir, were a very intelligent man, he said. I could take you round now, if you have time. Unfortunately, I have not, but these specimens are so well labeled and classified that they hardly need your personal explanation. If I should be able to look in tomorrow, I presume that there would be no objection to my glancing them over. Not at all. You are most welcome. The place will, of course, be shut up, but Mrs. Saunders is up in the basement for 4 o'clock, and will let you in with her key. Well, I happen to be clear tomorrow afternoon. If you would say a word to Mrs. Saunders, it would be quite in order. By the way, who is your house agent? Our client was amazed at the sudden question. Oh, indeed, in the Edgware Road, but why? I'm a bit of an archaeologist myself when it comes to houses, said Holmes, laughing. I was wondering if there's a Queen Anne or a Gregorian. Gregorian, no doubt. Really? I should have thought a little earlier. However, it's certainly ascertained. Well, goodbye, Mr. Garrideb, and may you have every success in your Birmingham journey. The house agent was close by, but we found it was closed for the day, so we made our way back to Baker Street. It was not until after dinner that Holmes reverted to the subject. Our little problem draws to a close, he said. No doubt you have outlined the solution in your own mind. I could make neither head nor tail of it. The head is surely clear enough, but the tail we should see tomorrow. Did you notice nothing curious about the advertisement? I saw that the word plough was misspelt. Ah, you did notice that, did you? Come, Watson, you improve all the time. Yes, it was bad English, but good American. The printer had set it up as received. Then the buckboards. That is American also. An artesian well a commoner with them than with us. It was a typical American advertisement, but purporting to be from an English firm. What do you make of that?
I can only suppose that this American lawyer put it in himself. What his object was, I fail to understand.
Well, there is an alternative explanation. Anyhow, we wanted to get this good old fossil up to Birmingham. That is very clear. I might have told him that he was clearly going on a wild goose chase, but on second thoughts it seemed better to clear the stage by letting him go. Tomorrow, Watson, well, tomorrow will speak for itself.
Holmes was up and out early. When he returned at lunchtime, I noticed his face was very grave.
This is a more serious matter than I expected, Watson, said he. It is fair to tell you so, though I know it will only be an additional reason for running your head into danger. I should know now, my Watson, by now. But there is danger, and you should know it.
Well, it is not the first we have shared, Holmes. I hope it may not be the last. What is the particular danger this time?
We're up against a very hard case. I have identified Mr. John Garrideb, counsel at law. He is none other than Killer Evans, of sinister and murderous reputation.
I fear I am none the wiser.
It is not for your profession to carry about a portable Newgate calendar in your memory. I have been down to see friend Lestrade at the yard. There may be an occasional want of imagination and intuition down there, but they lead the world in thoroughness of method. I had an idea that we might get on the track of our American friend in their records. Sure enough, I found the chubby face smiling at me from the rogue's portrait gallery. James Winter, alias Moorcraft, alias Killer Evans, was in the description below.
Holmes drew an envelope from his pocket.
I scribbled down a few points from his dossier. Aged 44, native of Chicago, known to have shot 3 men in the States, escaped from penitentiary through political influence, came to London in 1893, shot a man over cards in a nightclub at the Waterloo Road in January 1895. Man died, but he was shown to have been the aggressor in the row. Dead man was identified as Roger Prescott, famous forger and coiner of Chicago. Killer Evans, released 1901. Has been under police suspicion ever since, but so far as known he has led an honest life. A very dangerous man, usually carries arms and is prepared to use them. That is our bird, Watson. A sporting bird, as you must admit.
But what is his game?
Well, it begins to define itself. I've been to the house agents. Our client, as he told us, has been there for 5 years. It was unlet for a year before then. The previous tenant was a gentleman at large named Waldron. Waldron's appearance was not well remembered at the office. He had suddenly vanished, and nothing more could be heard of him. He was a tall, bearded man with very dark features. Now, Prescott, the man known as Killer Evans had shot, was, according to Scotland Yard, a tall, dark man with a beard. As a working hypothesis, I think we may take it that Prescott, the American criminal, used to live in the very room which our innocent friend now devotes to his museum. So at last we get a link, you see.
And the next link?
We must go now and look for that.
He took a revolver from the drawer and handed it to me.
I have my old favorite with me. It is, if our Wild West friend tries to live up to his nickname, we must be ready for him. I'll give you an hour for a siesta, Watson, and then I think we will have our time at Ryder Street Adventure.
It was just 4 o'clock when I reached the curious apartment of Nathan Garrideb. Miss Sanders, the caretaker, was about to leave, but she had no hesitation in admitting us, for the door shut with a spring lock, and Holmes promised to see that all was safe before we left. Shortly afterwards, the outer door closed, her bonnet passed the bow window, and we knew that we were alone on the lower floor of the house. Holmes made a rapid examination of the premises. There was one cupboard in a dark corner which stood a little away from the wall. It was behind this that we eventually crouched, while Holmes in a whisper outlined his intentions. He wanted to get our amiable friend out of his room. That is very clear, and
As the collector never went out, it took some planning to do it. The whole of this Garrideb invention was apparently for no other end. I must say, Watson, that there is a certain devilish ingenuity about it. Even if the queer name of the tenant did not give an opening which we would hardly have expected, he wove his plot with remarkable cunning.
But what did he want?
Well, that is what we are here to find out. It was nothing whatsoever to do with our client, so far as I read this situation. There is something connected with the man he murdered, the man who may have been his confederate in crime. There is some guilty secret in the room. That is how I read it. At first I thought our friend might have had something in this collection more valuable than he knew, something worth the attention of a big criminal. But the fact that Roger Prescott of evil memory inhabited these rooms to some deeper reason. Well, Watson, we can bring and possess our souls in patience, and see what the hour may bring.
That hour was not long in striking. We crouched closer in the shadow as we heard the outer door open and shut. Then came a sharp, metallic snap of a key, and the American was in the room. He closed the door softly behind him, and took a sharp glance around him to see that all was safe, threw off his overcoat, and walked over to the central table with the brisk manner of one who knows exactly what he has to do and how to do it. He pushed the table to one side, tore open the square of carpet on the floor, just as it remained, rolled it back completely, and then, drawing a jimmy from his side pocket, he knelt down and worked vigorously upon the floor. Presently we heard the sound of sliding boards, and an instant later the square had opened up the planks. Killer Evans struck a match, lit a stump of a candle, and vanished from our view. Clearly a moment had come. Holmes touched my wrist at the signal, and together we strode across to the open trapdoor. Gently as we moved, however, the old floor must have creaked under our feet, for the head of our American, peering anxiously round, suddenly emerged from the open space. His face turned upon us with a glare of baffled rage, which gradually softened into a rather shamefaced grin as he realized that 2 pistols were pointed at his head.
"Well, well," he said coolly as he scrambled to the surface. "I guess you have been one too many for me, Mr. Holmes. Saw through my game. I suppose played me for a sucker from the first. Well, sir, I hand it to you. You have me beat," and in an instant he had whisked out a revolver from his breast and had fired 2 shots. I felt a sudden hot sear as if a red-hot iron had been pressed into my thigh. With a crash as Holmes's pistol came down upon the man's head. I had a vision of him sprawling on the floor with blood running out of his face while Holmes rummaged him for weapons. Then my friend's wiry arms were around me, and he was leading me to a chair. "You're not hurt, Watson. For God's sake, say what you are not hurt." It was worth a wound, and it was worth many wounds, to know the depth of loyalty and love which lay behind that cold mask. The clear, hard eyes were dimmed for a moment, and the firm lips were shaking. For the one and only time I caught a glimpse of the great heart as well as the great brain. All my years of humble but single-minded service accumulated in that moment of revelation. "It's nothing, Holmes. It's a mere scratch." He had ripped at my trousers with a pocket-knife. "You're right," he cried, with an immense sigh of relief. "It is quite superficial." His face set like flint as he glared at our prisoner, who was sitting up with a dazed face. "By the Lord, all is well with you. If you had killed Watson, you would not have got out of this room alive. Now, sir, what have you to say for yourself?" He had nothing to say for himself. He only lay and scowled. I leaned on Holmes's arm, and together we looked down into the small cellar which had been disclosed by the secret flap. It was still illuminated by the candle which Evans had taken down with him. Our eyes fell upon a mass of rusted machinery, great rolls of paper, a litter of bottles, and neatly arranged upon a small table, a number of neat little bundles. "A printing press, a counterfeiter's outfit," said Holmes. "Yes, sir," said our prisoner, staggering slowly to his feet and then sinking into a chair. "The greatest counterfeiter London ever saw. That's Prescott's machine. And those bundles on the table are 2,000 of Prescott's notes, worth 100 each if they fit to pass anywhere. Help yourself, gentlemen. Call it a deal and let me beat it." Holmes laughed.
We don't do things like that, Mr. Evans. There's no bolt hole for you in this country. You shot this man Prescott, did you not? Yes, sir, and got 5 years for it. Though it was he who pulled on me. 5 years when I should have had a medal the size of a soup plate. No living man should tell Prescott from a Bank of England. And if I hadn't put him out of this world, he'd have flooded London with them. I was only one in the world who knew where he made them. Can you wonder that I wanted to get this place? But you can wonder that when I found this crazy boob of a bug hunter and a queer name squatting right on top of it, and never quitting his room, I had to do the best that I could do to shift him. Maybe I should have been wiser if I had put him away. I would have been easy to do enough, but I'm a soft-hearted guy that can't begin shooting unless the other man has a gun also. But say, Mr. Holmes, what have I done wrong, anyhow? I'm not used to this plant. I've not hurt this old stiff. Where are you getting me? Only attempted murder so far as I can see, said Holmes. But that's not our job. They take that to the next stage. What we wanted at present was your sweet self. Please give me the Scotland Yard call, Watson. It won't be entirely unexpected. Those were the facts about Killer Evans and his remarkable invention of the Three Garridebs. We heard later that our poor old friend never got over the shock of the dissipated dreams. When his castle in the air fell down, it buried him beneath the ruins. He was last heard at a nursing home in Brixton. It was over a glad day at the yard when Prescott's outfit was discovered. For though they knew that it existed, they were never able, after the death of the man, to find out where it was. Evans had indeed done a great service and caused several worthy CID men to sleep and sunder, for the counterfeiter stands in a class by himself as a public danger. They would willingly have subjected to the soup plate medal which the criminal had spoken, but an unappreciative bench took a less favorable view, and the killer returned to those shades from which he had just emerged. Let's see. Do I want to do a third story? Do we want to hear a third story? Do I have it in me to do a third story? No, I'm going to stick to 2 stories a week. That way I can finish the book in 3 weeks. Because there's 6 stories left. Okay. So the real question is now, who to raid? Let's see. AB is streaming. Good Red Striker, that would be really weird. I could read Sophia. She's reading Rinkatink in Oz. Looks like Doc's over for the night. Oh. Hold on. Gotta do stuff and such. I need at least 2 people for a raid. 2 people for a raid to count. I don't know if I have it. Ads are running anyway. That doesn't do me any good.
But yeah, let's go ahead and raid the Wonderful Dusk. Let me make sure. Okay, yeah, dock's off. Yeah. I'm gonna raid Sly. Just for the hell of it. I'm gonna raid Sorker Sly. Just because I want to. So, maybe. Computer? Computer? Did it start? Okay, it has. Okay. So I will see everyone hopefully tomorrow night for Friday Night Fairy Tales. I hope you have a good night, good evening, whichever you may be in at this moment in time. So